Good. Okay, should we get started? Bismillah, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa barak wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So we haven't met in a few weeks, I think. And the last time we met, we were continuing through this text that was giving us more of an in-depth understanding of the experience of Isra wal Mi'raj. The Prophet ﷺ goes from his home in Mecca to the city of Jerusalem, and then from there ascends into the heavens, led by the angel Gabriel. And this comes, we were talking about in a few different frames, right? One is a source of healing, that the Prophet at this juncture now has gone through a lot of difficulties. So it's not just that he has experienced the abuses of Ta'if and that he experiences the loss of his wife Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, or the loss of his uncle Abu Talib. But he's also gone through like more than a decade of persecution, boycotts, abuse. He's seen his companions being beaten, killed in atrocious ways, all for following what it is that he teaches and claiming that this will render them benefit in the world that they're experiencing now and in the next world. And after all of this is where Al-Isra wal Mi'raj comes. We talked about it in the frame of also just knowledge acquisition, right? That we said the Prophet ﷺ is now 52 years of age when this is happening. But everything we've looked at thus far, the angel Jibreel is taking him and he keeps asking, like, what is this, O Jibreel? What is this, O Jibreel? And there's an opportunity for learning, but the connection between these 2 points, that knowing also becomes a source of healing, right? That in our tradition, like Islam is a knowledge-based civilization, but the idea of having knowledge is not just so you can answer questions, but that it becomes a source of contentment. You know, we are not just driven through empirical-based understandings of things that can give us an answer of a how or a what, but religion can offer the answers to questions of why, you know, and those questions of why being answered can give a balance and a contentment inwardly. And so the Prophet is the messenger of God. He's the one receiving revelation, but he's still learning from the angel Gabriel, right? And we also look at it through the idea of the Prophet finding healing through recognizing that he's not the only one that's going through what he's gone through. So he's having conversations that we've looked at thus far with the Prophet Ibrahim, with the Prophet Isa, the Prophet Musa, peace be upon them all. We, I think, talked about like the prayers that he prays with everybody, and he's like led forth to lead the prayer. Did we talk about that? Sorry, I'm getting old, so I'm forgetting a lot of things. I'm looking at myself on this live stream, and like my beard is so gray against this black thing. Oh my goodness. And so we want to pick up there where we left off. And I think the last parts that we were talking about was how they were like greeting each other with greetings of peace, assalamu alaikum, and they were making dua together, right? Before we move forward on this piece where they're all praying together, right? So just to kind of recap, the Prophet ﷺ is now in Jerusalem, and they are praying a prayer that he leads with every single prophet praying this prayer behind him. And there's a lot that you can kind of extrapolate in terms of unity and kind of brotherhood, etc. In our tradition, like prophets and messengers have a unique sense of character. They have a higher level of ethical conduct. The Quran tells us to not mock other people's religions or beliefs, right? That's just straight from Quran. You're not supposed to mock people's religions and beliefs that are different from yours. If you were to compare the role of a prophet in our tradition versus other traditions, it's very different. You can pick up like biblical narrative and the way the prophet Moses is described as instances of committing incest. The prophet Abraham is described as being cowardly, right? And our religion doesn't do this. We understand every prophet of God to be an individual that embodies like high ethical conduct, aspires towards kind of beautiful character. Do you see? And understanding that in this regard, that's what then makes them exemplars, role models, people to follow. Is not that they just know a lot of things, but they treat people well. There's a sense of kind of dignity rooted in a humility that espouses itself through like the nature of your heart is demonstrated through how you treat people and how you treat creation. Does that make sense so far? Why it's relevant to a point we want to make before we continue on through this text is they are all now praying together. Do you understand? Like these people who engage in higher levels of ethical conduct and good character, each one of them is praying to God. A theme that's going to come up as we go forward through this is going to be an introduction of what's called the fitra, like a natural disposition, a primordial way of existence. And messengers of God are supposed to draw attentiveness to God. And their character and what they embody in terms of conduct is supposed to be something that is understood to be exemplary. And by design, they are showing us, like in human form, what balance looks like. So, a balanced individual who has good conduct and good character, they also have like faith and they engage in acts of worship. Does that make sense? And by design, we're supposed to be people who have a relationship with the divine. So, all of these people who are prophets of God praying with the Prophet Muhammad all together as balanced individuals, they're engaged in this practice because the way God made us was to know Him and have a relationship with Him. Do you understand? And the absence of that goes against the way that we're designed and made by our Creator. Does that make sense? Does it? Right? Okay. So the point is important because when religion gets reduced now to just practice, and you can say it's remarkable, they all prayed together, what an act of unity, which it is. And it gives a sense of not feeling isolated, that the prophet is doing this with everybody at a time when he's running on empty. But it's also showing us that throughout kind of historical experience, from Adam alayhi salam all the way to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, these were people who also fulfilled the purpose of worshiping God. And that plays a critical role in their hearts being in a place where they treat people well. They have good character, they have good morals, they have good ethic, they engage in good conduct. And when you get to places now where it's not God-centric, but it's egocentric, you have supremacist systems rooted in deeply entrenched anti-Blackness that embody a modern-day shirk of whiteness that by function embeds within us something that is against the way that we were designed to be. it doesn't then allow for what is innate to flourish, and we start to go against what is our natural disposition simply by succumbing and being subservient or submitting to other than the divine. Do you get what I'm saying? So just so we can make sure it sticks a bit, and just as people are trickling in, if you can turn the person next to you, what are you taking away from what I'm saying, right? Like, what is it bringing up this idea that these individuals are now engaged in this, and it's showing us, like, by design, this is something that we were just made to do. Do you see what I mean? Like, the chair is meant to sit in, right? It wouldn't make sense if I had the chair on top of my head. It only makes sense if I'm on top of the chair. Do you get what I mean? The laptop doesn't make sense to use as a frisbee, right? If we got up and we started throwing the laptop around like a frisbee, somebody could walk in and be like, "You bougie spoiled kids. Like, that thing is going to break. It costs a lot of money." Do you know? But it's also not supposed to be that. Do you see? Like, that's not what it was made to do. And these people who are exemplars for all, like, communities, and the prophet being one for all of humanity until the end of time, they're going back to this basic kind of understanding that by design we are supposed to be worshipers of the divine. And when there's imbalance in our lives, sometimes it's because we're moving away from what our natural disposition and how we were designed to be is, like, steps away from where we actually are. Do you get what I mean? So we just turn to the person next to us. More people have trickled in. You can exchange some names. What are you taking away from this point? And then we'll discuss for a couple minutes and then come back and talk, and then we'll continue on with the text. But go ahead. If you don't know the names of the person next to you, just exchange some names. Okay, so what are some of the things we're talking about? What are you taking away from this point? Was it that funny? Yeah. No, it wasn't funny. What did we discuss? Maybe we can get a couple of people. Yeah. Yeah, you're the only one with your hand raised.
And I think a lot of us are just realizing how we feel like everything around us is just so anti-Islamic inherently, like corporate jobs, like whatever. And it connects to what you were saying, I promise. But the idea is like we want to like sit and worship, and we know we've been designed for worship. We know this, and we can make everything an act of worship. It just feels like it's exerted, like we all have to, like we're made for it, but because the environment is not conducive to it, it just is so challenging. Like it's actually hard. Like I get off the plane and there's like explicit content everywhere you go. It's like I forgot this is where I live. This is my home. Like and seriously, like music. Like I don't just everything. Even like if you go back to work, it's like okay, like when we were on the trip, somebody got sick. Somebody cares for you. They give you whatever hydration packets they have, cough syrup, whatever. Here it's like, oh, you're called out sick, you're fired. And it's like literally. So I just I have no words. Those are my words.
Great. What else? What else did we discuss? Yeah.
On like a kind of similar note, we talked about like the egocentrism of society versus like a God-centered society, where basically if like we're all kind of there's not really a sense of community, like we're all kind of doing our own thing, we're competing against each other, and like New York City is like the prime example of this, where like the subway, like you take the subway to work, like no one looks at anyone, no one like acknowledges each other, and no one helps each other out. Like I was thinking like on the way back from work today, like in Medina, like we saw people handing out dates, like just we felt that sense of community there. Like if someone did that here, like you'd look at them like they're a crazy person.
Or it's like, I just want to add on to that. Or it's like, especially like sometimes on subway, like especially from my experience, like if like you see like a homeless person and like they're like literally hungry, right? Everyone's like quick to give $1, but like sometimes you can actually give them the food. Like for instance, like maybe you had some snack in your bag or whatnot. Like I know people will give you dirty looks and be like, oh, now this person's gonna be eating on the train or all this stuff. This is gonna make a mess or whatnot. And it's like people just like have like this like really crude mindset where it's like you literally have someone who's like actually starving, who like literally is homeless, and all you can think about is that now there's a slight inconvenience in my way, just because I need to get home or something like that, right? So definitely it's like that adding on to what you said, that mentality.
Okay. Other thoughts? Anything? So recognizing, yeah, Yassine, go ahead.
I would just say quickly, I think there is something that I feel like when you think about sort of what is our fitra and what's sort of natural for us as Muslimin, and I feel like a lot of times in modern society, you find yourselves going against what is usually our sort of natural inclinations. And I feel like society kind of is trying to push that in a lot of ways. So you see yourself, right, when you're sort of naturally inclined to want to help people, to be around people, society leans more towards an individualistic standpoint and separating people. It leans more towards ignoring the homeless and the people in need, ignoring the orphans, ignoring the whole countries of people that are being oppressed, you know. Whereas generally speaking, if you were to just put somebody in these situations, more likely than not, they would do something good to help people.
Yeah, and you know, people still have dispositions towards certain things, um, but in recognizing here where these are now representatives of generations, essentially encompassing the entire existence of humanity. You know, from Adam all the way to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, and they're in a place where they're all engaged in this practice because that's what it fundamentally comes down to. Do you know? Like, we are individuals. I am an abd, and Allah is Rabb, and that's the basis of all of it. Do you know? And in yielding to that, it becomes a critical variable in finding inward balance and finding inward contentment. And they're all doing it because that's what all of them are calling people to. They're not calling people to kind of, you know, this particular culture, this particular, like they're all praying together. Some of them are really wealthy, some of them are really poor, some of them have like hundreds and thousands and millions of followers, some of them have less followers than you can count on your two hands. Do you know, that's not the point of it. The point of it is that part of that contentment formula is like being connected to the divine and being in a place where you embrace that connection through being a worshiper of the divine. Do you see what I mean? Does that make sense? It's hard to be a worshiper of the divine if you're a worshiper of something else. Do you know? And they're demonstrating this in this way, and it becomes not in a vacuum, but it becomes a source of contentment. Sorry, hold on. So, as we continue to read through the text, they've now gone through this, and uh, he continues and he says, the Prophet then felt the greatest thirst that he had ever felt, whereupon Jibreel brought him a vessel of wine and a vessel of milk. He chose the latter, and Jibreel said, you have chosen fitra, natural disposition, and if you had drunken the wine, your community would have strayed from the right way, and none but a few of them would have followed you. I think we talked about this briefly last time, right? But the idea of how my decisions can bear impact on like my progeny, that I'm a product of choices made by my ancestors, but so too those who come after me, they will be a product of what it is that I've chosen to do. So if I choose, for example, to embrace certain practice or not embrace certain practice, like in a very tangible sense, that can have consequence. Do you see? Like if, you know, I decide that I'm not going to pray my prayers, right? There's a good chance that my kids are going to be impacted by that, right? It just makes sense logically. You don't want to throw your back against a wall and kind of engage in self-deprecating reflection. You just want to think, like, if I choose to do X, it's going to have an impact on what comes after. And if I choose to not do X, it'll also have an impact, right? That's one way of understanding this. But there's also an understanding that there can be like metaphysical implications, not just in terms of kind of what is tangible, but also the intangible. Like Ramadan is coming upon us soon. May Allah benefit us to reach it and take from it all that we can. The Prophet ﷺ, he comes out to tell the people one night of when Laylatul Qadr is, right? A night that we seek out. The Quran is sent down, better than 1,000 months worth of worship, all of these things. And people stand in prayer like throughout the nights of Ramadan, many in the last 10 nights, many on like the odd nights of the last 10 nights. Before the Prophet comes to like tell people, there's two people in the group that's gathered that start to argue with each other in a quarrelsome way. And when the Prophet like comes now, he says that he came to tell people of Laylatul Qadr, but their quarreling like lifted the knowledge from him. Do you see? Like the presence of that decision and that negative bears impact on the collective. And it's a hard thing to think about when it goes back to egocentricity, right? I want to believe that my fajr is just for me. Like it has nothing to do with you. Do you know? But it's not what our religion tells us. Like my fajr is for as much of an impact on others as like yours is. And when we look at this through the prism of whiteness and egocentricity, that's where it like shelves into this idea that religion is a personal venture. It's just me and my God. It doesn't mean you have to put your business out there, but as much as it's an individual journey, we bear impact on one another. And that impact is not just linear in the sense of what I do bears impact on you in the immediate in front of me, but what I do is also going to bear impact on people who come after me. Do you see? And the angel Jibrail is saying very definitively, had you chosen in the other direction, your community would have gone astray. And none but a few of them would have followed you, right? And you're talking about a community that is not just in the immediate, the people that we've looked at already and we've met thus far in the prophetic biography, but he is a prophet for all mankind till the end of time. Do you know? And one simple decision plays a role in like all of us still trying to like stick with this thing. As much as we get off a plane and we're now back in a prism of reality, right? So you went for Umrah, you're going to experience Ramadan, you go for Hajj. None of these things are meant to be escapes from reality. If you treat it that way, then reality is going to slap you in the face wherever you end up. But the transformative nature of not just a pilgrimage, but even a prayer and between prayers, as such that you are able to carry certain things inside of you wherever you go. And you don't want to be in a place where you think your choices are only about you. You can have direct and indirect impact on what's going to come in the immediate and what's going to come thereafter. It's a very selfless driven religion. Do you know? It doesn't tell us to be in denial of self-care, but it's not an either or. It is something that in a mode of empowerment teaches us that by design, our contentment is rooted in actually having consideration of others and not just ourselves. And in an era of modernity that tells us to worship feelings and to respond simply because I felt it, it entitles me to do whatever it is that I fundamentally want to do without consequence as to how what I do or don't do then impacts those who are recipient of what it is that's coming from me. The Prophet has now an option in front of him, and he chooses in one direction versus the other. Do you get what I mean? The milk versus the wine, and there's other narrations that come where they say there's another vessel that had water. Some say that there's honey in a vessel, right? He chooses the milk. Do you know? So if we only even look at these two options, wine versus milk, right? They're clearly not the same thing. Do you know? They're different. What makes the wine and the milk different from each other? That it has a relation to what the angel is calling the fitrah, the primordial state, a natural disposition. Does the question make sense? So you can turn the person next to you. What's like the difference between these two things, right? Wine versus milk. Why is like milk the way to go versus the wine is not? And how does it attach to this idea of just a natural disposition that we are created on as humans, right? Because there's hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he says that every child is essentially born upon the fitrah. Do you know, it doesn't say that every child is born on Islam. It says that every child is born upon the fitrah. And then their parents are the ones that kind of influence them to be whatever it is that they end up being. There's a natural disposition that innately we just are inclined towards. And here now, at 52 years of age, right, the Prophet is choosing the milk over the wine. What makes the wine different from the milk? That had he chose the former, like there wouldn't be as many of us doing this thing or trying to do it. But he chose the latter, and then there's a lot more of us than pretty much like any other community, right? There's other hadith where Musa alayhi salam is like being shown characteristics of like nations that are going to come, and he's like being shown depictions of a nation that is just going to be in like the multitudes of numbers. And he says, like, make this my nation, ya Allah. And Allah says, this is the nation of Ahmed. Like, there's a lot of us, right? Alhamdulillah. Do you know what I mean? But one decision impacts it. Understanding, like, at a base level, what's really going on that's different between these things. We can just talk about that for a couple of minutes, and then we'll come back and discuss, like, what's the difference between the wine and the milk? Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe this isn't the point of it, but like, was this like earthly, like wine, like not like wine of Jannah, and also like why did you offer this to
Because he was thirsty. He said he was thirsty, so he brought them these vessels to drink.
So was this like just like wine from earth, like intoxicating wine?
They're still in earth. Yeah. But I don't know if it would have intoxicated him or not, you know? Yeah. So, what's up?
I actually did very much. And I wanted to share with people.
Yeah, you can pass them around.
Okay.
Yeah,
Should I leave them outside?
yeah, you can just pass them around while people are talking. Yeah. Or you just, if you want to give them, whatever you want to do is fine. Yeah, yeah, I'd love to. These are from over there. Oh, nice.
Story. I cheated. I came back. There's a store right near my house.
And you bought them from near your house?
I did.
These are
But
great
they
ones.
said
That's
we
okay.
didn't date something.
There we go.
It's
We
like-
won't tell anybody.
We won't tell anybody. Shall I pass it?
Yeah, go for it. Okay. So, what's the difference between these two things? You're seeing got dates for everybody, so they're getting passed around in the back. There's a lot of people here, so just remember as you're taking dates, don't like take 50 of them in your hand. Huh? What's the difference between milk and wine here? Is there a difference? Yeah.
Sure. So we were discussing where wine or alcohol is an exogenous intoxicant. The idea is the person is taking a poison, and that which alters their mental states. Whereas milk is it's the first drink that a mammal has. It signifies a return to a creature's primordial nature. It is a nourishing, wholesome beverage. So yeah, I think that's what we had in mind.
Okay, great. Yeah.
I have a question.
No. Yeah. Yeah. No. I asked a question. You didn't ask a question.
Clarifying question.
No. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Just as to add to that beautiful note, that obviously alcohol
alcohol is something that dulls the senses, and if he's having this very immersive experience where he wants to remember everything, I don't want to consume something. I don't want to imbibe something that's going to dull that experience for me. I want to be able to be fully present. So I'm going to choose a thing that is not going to do that, which would be milk.
Okay. Other thoughts? What was your question?
Yeah, so like if actions are by their intentions, right? And his intention was just to quench his thirst. I guess I'm struggling with like the idea of like if he had like chosen to drink this thing, like a prophet I said to them, it would have led to like this like big demise. So
Well, everything has consequences. It sets precedents,
yeah.
right? And there's impact that's there. So what if when the people were throwing stones at him at Taif, he threw stones back at them, right? Like, what if when somebody was challenging him in kind of being in defiance of the religion of his grandfather, like he yelled at them? Do you know there's any number of scenarios where a choice could go in a different direction and then it bears consequences, right? Later on, we're going to see from Umar ibn al-Khattab, where, you know, when we were talking in the 40 hadith like sessions that we do, and the hadith we were looking at prior about, and we were talking about the sanctity of life. Like Umar, when he first became Muslim, whenever there was a problem, he would say, "Let me just kill this person." Do you know? And the Prophet says to him, like, we can't have people say that Muhammad is just killing his followers, right? And you can see like very tangible consequence in these ways. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. Any other thoughts on like the wine versus milk? What makes it different? Yeah.
Well, I also said that wine is more acidic than milk, and also I noticed the color as well. Like milk is white, and usually when we think about wine, we think about red wine, right? Like when wine being red.
Do you think about wine a lot? You think about it? Yeah. Yeah. It's okay, man. Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah. Yeah. You're gonna say something?
Yeah, I'm just thinking even like in terms of purity, you wouldn't give a baby wine, right? You give a baby milk because like a baby's a very pure being. It's like not. It's like just innately you see that as like an offensive thing to do. You wouldn't give a baby milk. It doesn't matter, or baby wine. It doesn't matter. You can go to a random person on the street and you feed a baby wine. Everybody's gonna have an issue with that, right? So there's like an inherent understanding that like purity and alcohol are two things that are really not compatible.
Yeah. So yeah.
I was just gonna say too. I think if you look at milk versus wine, in terms of just the general aspect of one is haram versus the other, and so what the precedence of the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam by choosing milk, which is the color of white and it's pure, versus wine, which is haram. A lot of times you will face difficult decisions and challenges in our ummah and trials, where you have to choose something that's desirous versus, you know, abiding by the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is our natural fitna. So by him choosing milk, it also set the precedence for us to sort of stay on that path.
But they're still in Mecca right now, right? They're in the 12th year of revelation. Do you know? And if we understand kind of the prohibitions, like they're just trying to survive at this point. Do you know what I mean? Like people are literally killing them. And the Prophet, when he went to Taif, what we said, he had severed ties with the people of Mecca and lost a lot of the protections that came in. But I get the point, right? But from like the standpoint of where they're at experientially from a revelation standpoint, they're not like at the end of Medina after 23 years of revelation. Do you know? This idea of purity is important to understand because milk, in its essence, at this time, especially, is a very pure substance from like every standpoint. Wine, in the way that it's formulated, is an adulterated beverage, right? It has to go through a process of fermentation that then creates like the grapes into wine, the dates into wine. It's not just produced innately, it has to go through that adulteration process in order for it to then yield this end product, right? Milk does not do that. So, milk today, like might get homogenized and all these other things. You go to other countries where you can just drink fresh milk. And it's got like the cream on the top of it and all this other stuff. I don't know if anybody's ever done that or not before. But the whole idea that the natural disposition is towards the natural substance and not to the one that had to go through a process of adulteration for it to now exist in the form that it exists. Do you get what I mean? Right? And the heart of the Prophet ﷺ is drawn towards what has purity to it, right? So when you're thinking about consequences and how could this actually bear that impact, you don't want to get stuck on just the specifics of the decision. And you want to think about what the foundational ethos is that's being called to here, that the Prophet innately, in a moment of thirst, is still drawn towards what has like goodness to it and wholesomeness to it, right? In Allah Ta'ala, tayyib la yaqbal illa tayyib. That indeed Allah is tayyib, He is pure, and He does not accept except that which is pure. Do you know? You don't want to think about this in like a puritanical kind of framework or a framework that is other than our religious tradition. So we're not talking about this like from a purity standpoint that becomes hypersexualized or these kinds of things. But what makes something tayyib, what makes something good and wholesome and pure in our religion is a little bit distinct. It shouldn't be reduced just to that level. And that's the whole idea, that you build yourself through what the religion offers to you in a way that you want to be like attracted towards things that have actual beauty to them, not superficial beauty. You don't want to be attracted towards complacency. You want to be attracted towards contentment. Intentionality plays a key role in something being tayyib, in terms of acceptance of something, as does capacity to discern right from wrongs within the prism, not of moral relativism, but what Allah deems to be right and wrong, so that both of those things go well together, the action and the intention. And the very first hadith we looked at on a Monday night more than a year ago, innamal a'malu bin niyat, it tells us how there's a manifestation of an act that is rooted in intention, but the action is the same. The intentions are different. So one person makes the hijrah for Allah and His Messenger. One person made the hijrah to get married. Both look exactly the same. You made the journey for God's sake, or you made the journey to get wed, right? And it's not other than that in the sense of like, well, what's my inner self really drawing me towards? And how do I take an objective look to be able to determine why am I attracted to what I'm attracted to? And why am I leaving behind what it is that I'm leaving behind? You go back to the initial part of this conversation, that by design, all of these prophets, they find their ethical conduct, their good character, their sense of contentment and balance by embracing the fact that they were designed to be subservient to God. And that then yields a perception that finds its place in decision making, that I'm not chasing after what has superficial value to it. I'm chasing after what has actual value to it. I'm not drawn towards places that are rooted in commodifying ugliness. I'm chasing after and am drawn towards what has like innate beauty to it. Do you know what I mean? And then my heart hurts when something's put in front of it that has ugliness to it. Do you know? The example that I like to give in some of these things, and you've heard me use it before, and why you want to go back to things again and again is so that we can look at different vantage points, right? I've shared with you, for example, when my son Kareem was watching a movie with my daughter Medina and my wife Priya, and I'd left the house and they were excited to watch this movie. And when I came back home and I saw my son sitting on this couch in our house, it was very clear that he had been crying. And I asked him what was wrong, and he said, Baba, nothing is wrong. And I said, I can tell something's wrong. And he started crying a little bit more. And he told me in the movie that they were watching, they've been excited to watch, that there was a scene where the father in the movie had a son with special needs and became agitated with his son, and then he slaps his son across the face. And my son is crying as he's telling me this, and he says, Baba, why would a father hit their son? And he's now consumed and digested this image that's ugly. And his heart is responding the way a heart that does not tolerate ugliness should respond in a moment like that, right? There's something off if you make justifications for your friends who mistreat the women in their lives. You're not like inclined towards what innately you should be inclined towards. If you can justify that because my friend spoke poorly to someone, that makes it okay. Do you see? When you get to a place where something just doesn't feel right inside, do you know? There's a little bit of something that's off. You don't want to become desensitized to it. But if I put the screen down right now and we turned on something where there was a man slapping a child, how many of us would like be in a place where our reaction would be what Kareem's reaction was? We might say that's bad, but it's not going to hurt us inside the same way. Do you know? And understanding, like, well, what adds to this and how does it then play a role in decision making? You are a product of your socialization. The feeling in and of itself is not what defines in actuality, like what is acceptable or unacceptable, et cetera, like right or wrong. Like you go back to what Allah is saying, as much as it's a struggle. And then when it's a struggle, you sit down and say, well, why am I inclined towards what is adulterated versus what is pure? Like, why do I keep choosing the thing that was adulterated rather than what actual has wholesomeness and goodness to it? You see? And what's getting in the way? And is it worth it for me to continue to have those things present in my life? And those choices are then what we have accountability towards. So I have an inclination. It's not always because I'm the worst human being in the world. A lot of people turn towards haram, not because they're bad people, but because there's an absence of communal support to help them where they are. But there are some of us also who just turn towards things that are not good, and it's giving us an indication to our inner state, our inner self. You struggle against it, and that's why you lean on like people who shouldn't be like pushing you down, but you surround yourself with hearts that are gentle and tender, and they help lift you up, right? So how do we know that the Prophet ﷺ is going to be somebody who stands well with his companions and he's going to be in a place, right? Like when we're in the instance of Taif before all of this, and the people of Taif line up in rows and they're stoning him and then getting to the front of the line and stoning him more. And Zayd ibn Haritha is with him at Taif and he tries to like protect the Prophet. And the Prophet has the wherewithal to tell Zayd, you need to step back because they're not gonna like be lenient on you. They know they can't kill the Prophet coming into Taif because he is still of Quraysh, and there will still be like retaliation in certain regards. Zayd ibn Haritha doesn't have anybody looking after him. Do you know? The Prophet knows how to make that decision and sees that even in a moment of difficulty. And you have to see the connection that he chose the milk over the wine and how it plays a role in him making these other choices. And when you're choosing what you're choosing, you have to then deal with the fact that it will have an impact on your heart. Not trivializing it, not channeling somebody who made you feel as if you have no relationship with the divine, or turned everything into black and white and haram and halal, and there's more haram than halal, which is simply just not true. You want to not push that aside, but work through it, and then see the choices that I choose, they do bear consequence inwardly as well as outwardly. Why am I attracted to the things that I'm attracted to? Why do I have inclinations towards what I'm inclined towards? Do you know? The angel comes, you can drink whatever you want. You want to have the wine, you want to have the milk. I never drank a wine before. The angel's giving me wine. Let me just take a sip of the wine. Do you know? The prophet just drank the milk, and that's it. Milk is a very unique thing, right? From a Sharia standpoint, milk is classified as both being a beverage and a food. If you drink like milk in a dream, it has like good meanings. It's like about the increase of knowledge and these kinds of things. Do you know? And we want to start to get to a place where the practice of our religion informs our behaviors at the level of decision making. It creates for us, the Quran, not like specific answers, right? I can't open the Quran and it's going to say, Khalid, here is specifically the job you should have. It's not going to say, Khalid, here's specifically the person you should marry. But it will create an ethical framework for which I can then make decisions and choices. Do you see? But the engagement of it still is a choice, right? And it's not an easy thing to kind of think about, but my heart is telling me what's going on with it if I don't even pick up the book and read it. Do you know? And what else am I going towards? Do you see? And why? And some of that's just about numbing pain. Some of it's that I'm just super exhausted and I don't know how to do anything other than in a state of exhaustion. So I'm binge watching stuff. Some of it is just I got all kinds of intrusive thoughts in my head. The only way I can silence that nonsense is by scrolling again and again and again. And I get temporary relief from everything that just sits inside of me, eating away at my inside. Do you know? And all of it's telling us about what's going on in our inside. And at some level, I have to decide, am I going to do something about it or not? Like, what am I inclined towards and what is it telling me about myself? And who's giving me the determinations that what my inclinations are, they have validity to it simply because I feel like it's the right thing to do, versus now rooting it in a definition that is fitri, that understands that natural disposition is the ability to discern right from wrong within the prism of what Allah is decreeing to be right and wrong, not what society is, not what your friends are, not what your family or your parents are telling you, right? But it's got a basis rooted in what Allah and Allah's messenger is saying. Do you see what I mean? Does that make sense? And so here, the prophet chooses what it is that is natural and not adulterated. So let's do this, because I just talked for a long period of time. If you turn the person next to you, like, what are you taking away from this part of the conversation so far? What is it bringing up for you? And we'll come back and discuss, but go ahead.
Thank you so much for
I'm
this.
sorry. Oh, no worries. Thank you.
Oh, I'm just going to Instagram. This is what you go. It's like one of our unbalanced.
Okay. What are some of the things are coming up for people right now? What are we taking away? What are we discussing? What do we talk about? Who wants to tell us what we discussed? Yeah.
So we're just talking a little bit about how we have to decide, so why are we making a specific decision, like in that very moment, why are we making a specific decision? Is it for Allah's sake, or is it, to look cool, or is it, like in order to gain validation from someone who's not Allah, from Allah? So I think that's what we were talking about. And like, I struggle with this sometimes, where I make decisions based off of trying, which is not for the sake of Allah. And I feel like I suffer sometimes when I make these actual decisions. So I think that ultimately it's important for us to be constantly reminding ourselves why is it that we're making these actions, or we are doing these certain things. Why? Is it for the sake of Allah, or is it for some other purpose, or are we just mindless in making these entire decisions? So I think that's what really came to mind, like in our conversation.
Okay, great. Other thoughts?
The story you shared about your son really impressed me. I've heard it before, but it had us thinking about how this life chips away and distracts us from who we are and our purpose in life. And just every distraction is like an ego band-aid.
And it's purposeful, right? Like if you can get people to be like so conflicted and agitated inside, people like so down and filled with just feelings of overwhelmingness, then you can get them to buy anything that you want that's going to tell them this is like the solution to your pain. This will make you happy. We create absolutes. There's nothing that is consistently like a ni'mah in our tradition other than iman. Like you can get married and it could be a blessing or it could be a fitna. You could have kids and it could be a blessing and it can be a fitna, right? You could have money and it could be a blessing or it could be a fitna. There's no way to say 100% this thing will be like good for you definitively. Sometimes, like it, if anything, it demonstrates that it's not, because it's not in a vacuum. It's in a world that is doing exactly what this is. It doesn't enable us to even enjoy like what we have, because we're always wondering if something else would be better in place of what we actually possess in the moment. And a lot of the times what we have in our hearts is not because of us. It's because of other people who had messed up hearts that then put some of their stuff into our hearts. Do you know what I mean? And the cliche has truth to it, right? Hurt people hurt people. Do you know? The Prophet is showing us that a hurt person does not have to hurt somebody. Do you see? Like he's showing us that you can play a role in standing up to the pain and still demonstrate that you're going to pass on not hurt but healing, right? He lost his father before he was born. He lost his mother at a young age. He lost his grandfather. He lived in like different places, Mecca, the Banu Sa'ad. He went to Medina. Like all kinds of things are going on before he's even a teenager. Experiences like wars and conflicts. He has not a lot of wealth, like difficult stuff. And then when he gets prophethood, the burden of prophethood, his companions are getting like abused and beaten. They live in a boycott where they have to boil like leather and eat it. And they're eating leaves. They don't have stuff, And he still like treats people nicely, right? It's aspirational, but that's like the sunnah you want to follow. Do you get what I mean? But you can't undermine that, like the sunnahs of your prayers are part of those sunnahs as much as like the sunnahs of like service and like the sunnahs of generosity are a part of it also, right? It's an all-encompassing like set of practices and norms. Do you get what I mean? It's not an either or, it's a both and. Does that make sense? And this world is a world of decision making. It's a world of choices. This is what we get assessed on. You don't get assessed on what happened prior to this, right? The abode of the arwah. You don't get assessed on what happens in the womb. You don't even get assessed on like the first like decade plus of your time here, right? It's like everything that comes from adulthood. Do you know? The barzakh, the grave, you can't do anything there. Do you know what I mean? We can do stuff for the people there, but that's a place, inshallah, of rest. Do you know? May Allah make it a place of rest for us. The day of judgment is when you're taken into account. You can't say on the day of judgment, let me just go back and do something else, right? Like, this is the place you do. Do you know? And when you're tired and you're broken, like, you're still doing even if you don't know why you're doing. Do you know? Like, do you know why you want to get married so badly? Do you know why, like, you think having kids is the most important thing? I'm not knocking it, you know, but I'm saying, do you bring your consciousness into it? That you're making a choice and it's keeping you from seeing what's in front of you because it's myopic, like what it is that you must have, and it keeps you from understanding all the other stuff that you have in front of you. You see what I mean? And a lot of that gets put into here from like people around us or the society around us. And at some level, I just got to make a determination as best as I can. Like, I don't want this like clutter in me anymore, man. I'm tired of numbing pain. It just keeps coming back. I don't want to put a Band-Aid on something. I want to actually like heal these wounds. Do you know? And then the role we play in it for each other, right? He just prayed with every other prophet of God. He's with his teacher, Jibreel alayhi salam. He's not alone. Being sad sucks. Being sad by yourself is that much harder. And you want to assume that everybody's got some crap going on in their life, right? So you follow as best as you can, like where you can interject kindness and generosity and compassion. And if you're running on empty, you just acknowledge it. So you go and rest, but it doesn't become an excuse then to add to kicking someone who's already down. Do you see what I mean? And the decision making becomes important. Okay. Let's keep reading. So I'm going to read some things that get us to a place now where the prophet is like taken into Jannah. And then for next week, we'll like start to read the parts of things that he's seeing there. Then the prophet was brought the ladder by which the spirits of the children of Adam ascend. Creation never saw a more beautiful object. It had alternate stairs of silver and gold and came down from the highest and amplest garden of paradise, Jannat al-Firdaus. It was encrusted with pearls and surrounded with angels on its right and left. The prophet began his ascent with Jibreel until they reached one of the gates of the nearest heaven called Bab al-Hafadha. There an angel stood guard named Ismail, who is the custodian of the nearest heaven. He inhabits the wind. He never ascends to the heaven nor descends to earth, except on the day that the prophet died, blessings and peace be upon him. In front of him stood 70,000 angels, each angel commanding an army of 70,000 more. Jibreel asked for the gate to be open. Someone said, "Who is this?" Jibreel is what his response was. "Who is with you?" Muhammad. "Has he been sent for?" "Yes." "Welcome to him from his family. May Allah grant him long life. A brother of ours and a deputy of Allah. And what excellent brother and deputy. What an excellent visit is this." The gate was opened. So from here, we'll kind of move into the first person he's going to meet is Adam alayhi salam, going through these kind of levels and like different things that he's shown. So we'll pick up from there from next week. Next week, like the academic semester starts. And so Dr. Marwa will be doing her halaqah at 6. And then we'll start this one at 7. And the building hours will resume what they are during the academic term. So I think 11 o'clock, like the building will close. So we'll start at 7 and go to like around 8:30 or so, inshallah. I think Sheikh Fayaz has a halaqah tomorrow. And we have Jummah on Friday. I don't know if we have lunch on Friday, this Jummah. Did anybody come here for Jummah last Friday? Was there lunch last Friday? There was lunch last Friday? Yeah, so I don't think there's lunch this Friday. Maybe there is. I don't know. But Monday the building is closed. So we won't have our Monday halakha that we normally do. And then from Tuesday, we'll resume kind of the natural, like the regular things. The university still has, just so people are aware and you can tell other people, it still has like its visitor policy restrictions in place from the end of last semester. The exception that they've made is for religious services, right? So people can come to Jummah and they can come for like prayers, like halakas, these types of things. And they're doing it for all of the religious communities, not just ours. So some of our programming is augmented right now, the way we would have like a lot of like visiting speakers and other conferences and things. We're not planning a lot of that at the moment because of kind of the restrictions on visitor policies. Does that make sense? But you can come to Jummah, you can come to the halakas. We'll keep people updated. If there's any types of change, likely that will come once the semester gets going, and we'll keep people in the loop on that, inshallah. And stuff that we do that's not on campus but off campus, those types of things will still continue to happen. Yeah.
You said that they've lessened the restrictions, or they've kept it the same?
It's the same as what it was at the end of last semester, right? But I think the way I've just been getting emails from people every day asking like, can I come to this or come to that? So the policy is that only NYU ID card holders can come and go to programming type events, right? What they've made an exception for is for like religious communities to attend religious like services. So you come in to pray, they'll let you pray.
Like for any prayer?
Yeah, like you come for Jummah, right? We do like a halakha, we have iftar, these types of things. But this is one of the reasons why we haven't been doing like some of the other programs that we would do that are oriented towards our community. And I don't know where that's going to shift or not, but just so people have an idea and you can kind of share that. If you're a student here, we'll still have like student focused programming that our students are, allowed to attend. But we'll keep people updated on that. Yeah. Okay. So why don't we take a pause here? The building's going to close at 8. If people haven't prayed Isha, we'll make a Jama'ah for Isha in like 5 minutes. And that'll give people some time to also just kind of be with each other after we pray. And then we'll see everybody next Wednesday, inshallah. If you can put chairs against the wall, I'd appreciate it. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum, how are you?
Good. I have a lot of things for you.
You do?
Yeah.
Did you end up talking to Sheikh Baz about February? No?